In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, July 2nd, here on the peninsula. A car crashes into a crowd of pedestrians in central Seoul Monday evening, killing 9 and injuring 4. The cause of the crash is under investigation. And North Korea claims it successfully tested a new type of tactical ballistic missile carrying a mock warhead. The claim was carried by its state-run media. Meanwhile, South Korea's consumer price index accelerates 2.4% on-year in June, the slowest pace in almost a year, despite high costs of fruits and crude oil. A heavy rain advisory is in place here in the Greater Seoul area as well as in the country's southern region. The Interior and Safety Ministry has also activated Level 1 of operations at the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters and raised the warning level to caution. Weather authorities say between 80 and 120 millimeters of rain will pound the central and southern parts of the country until tomorrow. Now, given the start of the monsoon season here, the ministry has called for public caution against flash floods as well as landslides and pledged prompt assistance to residents in vulnerable areas. Also, on the local front, there was a shocking traffic accident here in capital Seoul Monday evening. A car rammed into a group of pedestrians, killing 9 and injuring 4. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
A devastating scene in downtown Seoul on Monday night when a car drove into a group of pedestrians waiting at a crosswalk. Police say 9 people were killed and 4 others were injured in the accident near Seoul City Hall at around 9:27 p.m. The driver, a 68-year-old man, is blaming sudden unintended acceleration for the accident. However, a witness at the scene is saying otherwise.
마지막에 밟은 거예요. 저기 앞에서 다 치고 나서 거의 치고 났어요. 그 앞에서 급발진 차량은 사고 날 차일 때 알잖아요. 전봇대라도 박아야 되잖아요. 그거 없었어. 그냥 거기서 딱 멈췄어요.
Another expert said that the driver did not try to avoid the pedestrians as you would in case of a sudden acceleration, adding that the deadly accident could have simply been caused by a mistake or carelessness. The vehicle was also seen driving in the wrong direction and collided with 2 vehicles before hitting people. Police who apprehended the driver said he was not under the influence of alcohol. Investigators are not fully ruling out the possibility of issues within the car, considering the speed, reportedly 100 kilometers per hour, involved. Police say they will swiftly carry out the investigation based on statements from the driver and witnesses, CCTV and security camera analysis. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in other news, North Korea says it successfully test-fired a new type of tactical ballistic missile carrying a mock warhead on Monday. Our correspondent Bae Eun-ji has details.
A day after its latest missile launch, North Korea has claimed that it successfully tested a new type of tactical ballistic missile, carrying a 4.5-ton super-large warhead. This is the first time that the North has said it tested such a missile. The North state-run media said Tuesday that the test of the new missile, named Hwasongpo 11-Ta 4.5, was conducted with a mock warhead, aimed at verifying flight stability and accuracy to see if it can fly a maximum range of 500 kilometers and minimum range of 90 kilometers. It added that the regime will carry out another test launch of the same type of missile this month to test the accuracy and the explosion power of the super-large warhead. South Korea's military detected 2 ballistic missiles fired by North Korea early on Monday. One was launched at around 5:05 a.m. and the next at 10 minutes later, both fired from the Changyeon area of the North's Hwanghae-namdo province. The first one, presumed to be a short-range ballistic missile, flew around 600 kilometers before landing in the sea. This was followed by a second missile that only traveled around 120 kilometers. The military said the second launch appears to have been unsuccessful and said the debris could have landed near the North's capital area. It assumed that both missiles could have been the Hwasong-11 short-range ballistic missiles, which were also test-launched from the Changyeon area last year, but did not completely rule out the possibility of a test launch of a new type of missile. Meanwhile, a plenary meeting of North Korea's ruling party took place for 4 days in Pyongyang until Monday, focusing on the economic situation. State media said Tuesday that Kim Jong-un assessed the regime's economy in the first half of this year has improved compared to the same period last year, and that crops across the regime's farmlands are also doing well. What's notable about the latest plenary meeting was that North Korean officials were seen wearing a pin with an image of Kim Jong-un for the first time, as part of the regime's latest efforts to strengthen the power of its third-generation leader. Pounds, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for rational dialogue and compromise for the sake of improving people's livelihoods and careers prospects. The remarks come in light of the 3-day interpellation at the Nat'l Assembly on government policies. Addressing members of his cabinet earlier on this Tuesday, President Yoon also pointed out that while the Korean economy appears to be in a positive path to growth, the lives of ordinary Koreans remain vulnerable to a number of grave concerns, including a dismal birth rate amid a rapidly aging society. He went on to add that social polarization and generational clashes, that is, were doing little to brighten Korea's future. With regard to party clashes at the parliament, President Yoon urged for consensus, keeping in mind that lawmakers and government authorities share the common goal of seeking to enhance public livelihood. And in related news, the National Assembly on this Tuesday afternoon begins its interpellation of the Yoon administration's policies. Now today, the Q&A session focuses on politics, diplomacy and security. Much attention is expected to be centered on the government's response to North Korea's latest provocations, including the latter's floating of waste-carrying balloons into South Korea. Tomorrow, that is Wednesday, the session will touch upon the economy. And on the last day, that is Thursday, social issues, including education, will be addressed. Just 6 months after taking office, the head of the country's broadcasting regulator has tendered his resignation. Now, his move comes amid a vote led by the opposition-controlled parliament to impeach him. Kim Hong-il, the chairman of the Korea Communications Commission, claimed he was stepping down to allow for a successor to promptly continue his duties, as an impeachment could mean a vacant post for at least several months. According to the top office earlier this morning, President Yoon Suk-yeol has accepted Kim's resignation. Korea's consumer price index accelerated 2.4% on-year in June, the slowest pace, that is, in almost a year, despite the high costs of fresh produce and petroleum. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
Inflation in South Korea is showing signs of stabilizing in the 2% range despite continued high prices for fruit. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday shows that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose by 2.4% in June compared to the same month the year before. This is the lowest figure seen in 11 months, inching closer to the target inflation at 2%. The rise in consumer prices hovered above 3% at the start of the year before dropping below the 3% mark in April and remaining in the 2% range for 3 consecutive months. Core inflation excluding volatile food and energy prices came to 2.2%, while the index measuring 144 daily necessities rose by 2.8%. Prices for fresh produce drove these figures, with the cost of fresh fruit rising by more than 31% on year. Apple prices jumped over 63%, while the cost of pears more than doubled. Petroleum prices also showed the largest hike in a year and a half, surging by 4.3%, with a spokesperson from Statistics Korea claiming that this was due to the base effect of petroleum prices being low this time last year. Speaking at a meeting to discuss these latest figures, the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance said that this falls in line with earlier predictions from the government for prices stabilizing in the mid-2% range in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, the Agriculture Ministry pledged to stabilize the supply and demand of vegetables vulnerable to summer rain and heat, as well as preemptively managing potential risks such as diseases affecting fruit trees. Starting yesterday, the government applied a new tariff quota to 7 different types of food ingredients such as coffee concentrate, as well as extending the lower tariffs on 28 types of fruit until the end of September. It will also strengthen inspections on the oil market after the partial return of taxes that scaled back the fuel tax cut on gasoline from 25% to 20%. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Seoul's Unification Ministry has released records of interKorean dialogue during the 1980s when power shifted from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-il. Now, this is the 5th release of such records, with the first public disclosure taking place in the year 2022. The ministry explained that releasing the records is aimed at meeting the public's right to information and enhancing the transparency of policies regarding North Korea. The ministry claims the 1980s records show active interactions between the two Koreas that even paved the path to the first cross-border family reunions in the year 1985. The two Koreas held their first talks in the early 1970s. Elsewhere, Israel's military has ordered the evacuation of areas to the east of Gaza's second largest city, Khan Younis, on Monday night local time. The order was made after some 20 rockets were fired into Israel by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad from the city. Pundits believe the call for evacuation indicates a fresh ground offensive by Israel into Khan Younis. The call covers the area around the city's European hospital, as well as temporary tent shelters for the displaced. On a light note now, eco-friendly villages are looking to advance sustainable tourism practices in the Asia-Pacific region, and my colleague Lee Sujin sheds light on such green destinations over in the Philippines as well as here in South Korea. Do take a look.
It's that time of the year when the urge to travel goes up with the temperature. But now more travelers are looking for ways to help the planet when they go on vacation. And that's why leaders in the political world and tourism sector met in Cebu on Friday to discuss how to meet the demand for sustainable tourism at the 36th joint meeting of the UN Tourism Commission for East Asia and the Pacific.
We must go green in the transformation of our tourism products. I am of the belief that the greener you are, the better the tourism experience will be.
And one way countries in the Asia-Pacific region offer sustainable tourism is through eco-friendly villages.
One such eco-friendly village here in the Philippines is Boho, which is named one of UN Tourism's best tourism villages in 2021 for its commitment to sustainability and promoting local communities.
Tourists can travel down the Boho River, which spans 1.4 kilometers, in eco-friendly wooden boats where they're surrounded by mangrove trees and sounds of more than 60 bird species. And these sustainable practices have also reached the local population, as the traditional dance performances for those who visit Boho have created jobs. At another eco-friendly village where the Boho River enters the ocean, locals weave fiber ropes from the husks of coconuts to create biodegradable tents. There are also cooking demonstrations, keeping the village's traditions alive through food. Tours of eco-friendly villages are also available at 2 villages on South Korea's Jeju Island that were recognized as best tourism villages last year. Sewa Village keeps its local traditions alive by allowing tourists to experience the Haenyeo culture. And this also provides a chance for the female divers to make extra income. Dongbek Village promotes local products made with camellias, from which the village got its name, to produce oil that is used to create various local dishes. And these tour options have wide-reaching positive effects.
It is a huge contributor to the balance of payments, to income, and we see that through many programs that we have ourselves, like Tourism for Rural Development, where we have a lot of villages in Korea as well.
She added that to keep the momentum of eco-friendly bilateral tourism going, countries will need to work together to ease visa regulations and increase air capacity. Lee Sujin, Arirang News, Cebu.
In our latest interview segment, one of the world's most accomplished economists has called on South Korea to avoid policies that seek to prevent inevitable market developments and to focus instead on economic flexibility and the fostering of its immigrant workforce. Our Paku has more.
South Korea has seen on-year increases in exports for 9 consecutive months, leading to rosy economic prospects for trade. Despite a positive outlook, pundits point out difficulties that could distract the country from seeing further positive results. I sat down with Professor Krueger, the former First Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, to get her take.
Korea is in a difficult situation because of the trade war between the U.S. and China, no doubt about that. I think Korea is in difficulty because obviously there's some things where the Americans are concerned about the military secrets, some of which could be important, and they don't want any of that to go to the Chinese too easily too soon. And if there are some of those components, then there will be some troubles without doubt, because right now the U.S. is pushing that very strongly.
She provided more detail on how South Korea should react to such uncertainties.
There are a lot of uncertainties with regard to world trade that Korea, like anybody else, is subject to. Only because Korea is more dependent on trade, it may be more important here to do it. The only problem is that all you can do about it is make sure that the domestic economy is healthy, to make sure that it's flexible, and to make sure that the markets can adjust as they need to, and not try to regulate and prevent things from happening, because fighting markets is not a formula for success ever.
She also spoke about the need for policies to allow more immigrants to come to Korea to improve economic growth.
Korea has not allowed very many immigrants. The countries that have are doing better. One of the reasons the U.S. economy is doing so well is we still have the immigrants in, and it may very well be that Korea wishes to change at least somewhat immigration policy and bring in more foreigners with either the skills or just the jobs that need to be filling.
The professor was in Seoul last week for the Seoul International Finance Conference, where she took part as a keynote speaker and addressed South Korea's significance in the region. How important is Korea in the global economy as Asia's financial hub?
Seoul is already a financial center for Korea. Korea's economy is healthy. I think there would have to be some opening up even more of the capital account and a few other things, but on the whole, if those things are done, I think the likelihood that things can work out very favorably is very good.
Paku, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today in the US, where the Supreme Court has said that Donald Trump and other former presidents are partially immune from prosecution in Monday's landmark ruling recognizing presidential immunity for the first time. The U.S. Supreme Court justices ruled 6-3 on Monday, saying that former President Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for any official acts that were within his constitutional rights as the incumbent president. He can still face charges for private, unofficial acts committed. The 3 liberal members who voted against immunity for official acts said they, quote, fear for our democracy. Justice Sonia Sotomayor added a warning that the president is now a king above the law. The ruling will have a huge impact on the federal criminal case against Trump on charges of attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Airplane manufacturer Boeing is set to face criminal charges over fraud related to 2 fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jets. The U.S. Justice Department will criminally charge Boeing and offer the plane maker a plea deal that includes a financial penalty of some $500 million and independent audits for safety and compliance practices under 3 years of probation. Last month, U.S. prosecutors suggested for the Department of Justice to bring criminal charges against Boeing for violating a 2021 settlement covering 2 crashes in 2018 and 2019 that killed 346 people. Both crashes were reportedly linked to faulty flight control systems, and part of the 2021 deal involved creating a compliance system related to these safety aspects. However, in May, the Justice Department found that Boeing failed to do so, stating a breach of the deal. Boeing will reportedly have until the end of the week to plead guilty or face a trial. A fearsome Category 4 storm hit islands in the Caribbean on Monday, bringing catastrophic winds, life-threatening storm surges, and intense rainfall. Hurricane Beryl made landfall on Grenada's Kariakou Island on Monday morning with speeds of up to around 240 kilometers per hour. Grenada Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, in a news briefing, spoke of widespread reports of destruction and devastation, adding that Kariakou was flattened in 30 minutes. While communications are mostly down, there are no immediate reports of deaths or injuries on the island. While a hurricane watch has been announced for Jamaica, a tropical storm warning is in place for the Windward Islands and the southern coast of Haiti. Hurricane Beryl reportedly strengthened from a tropical depression to a major hurricane in some 42 hours. It is also the earliest Category 4 Atlantic hurricane on record. A Chinese space rocket under development accidentally launched during a test before falling and crashing into the ground. Beijing Tianbing Technology Company, also known as Space Pioneer, said on Sunday that its Tianlong-3 rocket under development detached itself from the launch pad during a test on Sunday due to a structural failure. It then fell and crashed into a mountain 1.5 kilometers southwest of the test site in Gongyi City in central China's Henan province. No casualties were reported. Footage shows that the rocket slowly launched before it appears to lose power, crashing down to the ground and exploding. The Tianlong-3 has been developed with the intention of being a reusable rocket. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Monsoon rain pours down today. The government also raised a heavy rain crisis alert level for the country from attention to caution. And until tomorrow morning, the upper parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do could see more than 120 millimeters. Seoul and surrounding areas could see up to 100 millimeters of downpours. So a heavy rain advisory has been issued in central parts of the country, but more regions could be under a rain advisory later in the day, along with a wind advisory. Jeju Island will be free from rain, but it will be quite windy today. Along with sunshine, the island should have a high of 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Rain lets up early in Gwangju and heat sets in at 31 degrees Celsius. But heat takes a break with rain in central regions topping out at 25 degrees here in Seoul and Chuncheon. The rain lets up tomorrow morning, then another band of monsoon rain is in the forecast for later this week and into the weekend. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and that ends our Tuesday afternoon newscast. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon Korea's ties with Vietnam. Do stay with us. Thank you for now.
recording to playback. Everything you need in video production. New software at no additional charge with unlimited upgrades. Creativity I want. Easily with Gum Easy Pass. Get now for $2.99.
Adventure. Play now.
South Korea and Vietnam celebrate 32 years of diplomatic relations this year, having forged formal ties back in 1992. So what have been some of the milestones in bilateral ties over the years? What have been some of their key economic ventures? And what has been the role of Hallyu in promoting bilateral cultural interests? Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min San-hee. Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh is here in South Korea on an official visit at the invitation of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. For more on the partnership between the two countries, I have Professor Rajiv Kumar from Hanguk University of Foreign Studies here in the studio. Professor Kumar, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Professor Song Seong at Chungang University with us live on the line. Professor Song, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me again. Yeah.
Professor Song, we'll start with you. Now, back on Monday, that's yesterday, Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh attended a business forum hosted by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. What were some of your takeaways from that particular forum?
As for the forum itself, is not the more important. Of course, it is very important forum, but however, what is more important from the Vietnamese side is the reason is currently South Korea is one of the largest export market to Vietnam, particularly the smartphone and some electricities and other types of, particularly the garments, I mean fabrics. So because from Vietnamese perspective, South Korea, as long as because of the a little bit tense relationship between China and the U.S., then the South Korea government would like to move away from their factories and investment in China to neighboring countries such as Vietnam. So to that regard, this is a very welcoming sign of Vietnamese to increase and the trade relationship and also improve the diplomatic relationship. That is realized as some comprehensive strategic partnership has been attained or accomplished between the two countries. So to that regard, Vietnam has a strong incentive to foster and improve and maintain, continue the current trend. So that's why the Pham Minh Minh, who is the third ranked highest government official in Vietnam, has come to South Korea. Yeah.
Right, indeed. And before we delve further into the trade ties, Professor Kumar, South Korea and Vietnam, as I mentioned earlier in the clip, forged diplomatic ties back in the year 1992. That being said, could you walk us through some of the milestones in bilateral ties over the years?
Yeah, that's a very important relationship. Since the establishment of the ties in 1992, both countries have achieved significant milestone in economic areas, politics and diplomacy, as well as cultural areas. Let me go one by one. I think the economic relationship is a key pillar of South Korea-Vietnam relationship. As Professor Song also mentioned that, the tie between South Korea and Vietnam is really deepening, in a great way. For example, South Korean companies are the largest investor in Vietnam. So far, they have invested more than 90 billion US dollar in 10,000 projects in Vietnam. That's too huge number. Not only investment, but trade as well. Look at the trade figure of South Korea. Vietnam has emerged as the third largest trading partner of Korea after China and United States. Look at the ODI. Vietnam is the largest ODI recipient from Korea. So these suggest that economic is the backbone of this relationship. Now on diplomatic front too, Korea and Vietnam both established comprehensive partnership in 2001. They established a strategic partnership in 2009, and then recently in 2022, they established comprehensive strategic partnership. So these upgrades suggest that really there is something going on really real in Korea-Vietnam ties on security and defense front as well. Now, last but not least is the people-to-people connection between Korea and Vietnam. Look at the Vietnamese national working in Korea at the moment. They are the second largest group in Korea after the Chinese people. There is also a large number of Vietnamese students are studying in Korea at the moment. They are also the second largest after the Chinese students. On the other hand, for Korean travelers, Vietnam emerged as the best destination. So to conclude, the Vietnam-Korea relations, achieving significant milestone in politics, economy, culture as well. Yeah.
Right. So the ties between the two countries, Professor Song, as Professor Kumar has mentioned, is quite active. That being said, Professor Song, what more can you tell us about the economic partnership between these two countries?
Yeah, actually, Professor Rajiv has also mentioned comprehensively about the economic relationship between the two countries. Clearly, the driving force to make the South Korea and Social Republic of Vietnam has been improved and increased. The main reason, a primary reason, is due to the conflict between the China and the U.S. Trade conflict. So that is kind of a byproduct and benefit enjoyed by the very fortunate opportunity for Vietnam. But Vietnam, as I mentioned earlier, they would like to maintain this kind of momentum, not only in trade and economic ties, but also in diplomatic ties. I believe the reason is, of course, the South Korea and Vietnam is very close to the second largest political power and economic power in the world right now, China. Therefore, they have a strong incentive to have some counterbalancing power in these areas. So that's why the Vietnamese government, even though they have some different political ideology and some relatively economic implementation policy-wise, there is clearly some difference. But however, both countries have recently, Vietnam has shown very strong economic growth rate, as well as the base wage salary has been also increased very a lot for the and also pension system has been adopted for the Vietnamese people. So to that regard, Vietnamese government would like to focus, improve some welfare for the Vietnamese people. And also, Professor Rajiv has mentioned that one of the largest second largest population in Korea, and also so many Koreans pay a visit to Vietnam for the purpose of tourism or also settlement. So to that regard, the prospect is quite promising for both countries, and there is a strong incentive to continue this trend also. So that is why the Pan Min Bin has come here, and then as a way to show some friendship and improve the hospitality between those two countries as well.
Right. And on the Vietnamese Prime Minister's agenda here in South Korea, aside from the business forum that we mentioned earlier, is also a cultural forum, Professor Rajiv Kumar. How effective, do you suppose, has the presence of Hallyu in Vietnam been in promoting bilateral ties, do you think?
Yeah, that's a very crucial aspects of South Korea-Vietnam relations. Hallyu has a very deep positive impact in Vietnam. K-pop, that includes music, fashion, drama, all gain immense popularity in Vietnam. I have traveled to Vietnam and I have seen the impact of Hallyu in Vietnam. And it has also a very important impact on economic relations as well as people-to-people tie as well. For example, from economic side, due to Hallyu, Korean companies are able to sell their products in Vietnam. They have seen the rise of their sales in Vietnam market. At the same time, Korean companies are also investing in Vietnam retail and entertainment sector due to the rise of Korean product popularity in Vietnam. If you look at the impact on people-to-people ties due to Hallyu, that's also very significant, because as many Vietnamese youth, they came to know about Hallyu and they are quite impressed with Hallyu. They want to come to Korea. And that is why, as I mentioned, that currently 70,000 Vietnamese students are studying in Korea, and that number is going to increase very soon, because a large number of Vietnamese students, they want to come to Korea to study. Not only that, Vietnamese people, they are also now preferring to come to Korea for tourism. And according to one report, the Vietnamese tourist emerged as one of the largest spender in Korea. So we can see that the Hallyu has a significant impact on economic ties as well as people-to-people tie as well.
Right, indeed. Professor Song, perhaps I should have asked you this earlier, but what makes Vietnam a lucrative investment destination for South Korea? And likewise, what makes South Korea an appealing economic partner for Vietnam?
Currently, I think it is biased. I mean, so it is not anymore level ground, because to Vietnam is economy, South Korea is a really good export market. Like the South Korea in 1980s, the U.S. is a really good export market. But currently, the import from South Korea to Vietnam is not much. I don't think much, because currently the per capita GDP is still 1/4 of South Korea, and even with 1/10. And considering the purchasing power parity, the per capita GDP would be 1/4 of South Korea. So to that regard, the Vietnam is not a good export market from South Korea's perspective, but that is relatively the price is cheaper in Vietnam. Therefore, the South Korean manufacturing companies, or they could make some investment in Vietnam to manufacture, to export the products to some advanced country through Vietnam. That is why the South Korea economy has invested so much in Vietnam and through the ODA. And also so many people, for example, I just saw a moment ago, the Ann Krueger has mentioned, who paid a visit to Korea, has mentioned the Korean government would like to be flexible enough to adopt or accept the foreigners as a source of the labor. And so to that regard, the Vietnamese 45,000 people has applied for the application for the job in South Korea. So that is a very good signal to have some good perspective between the Vietnam and South Korea.
Right, of course, indeed. And back on the diplomatic front, Professor Kumar, last year alone, Vietnam played host separately to the leaders of South Korea, the US, as well as China. And this year, quite recently, it played host to the Russian leader as well. What do you suppose is the importance of Vietnam to its regional partners, especially amid the current geopolitical tensions?
Yeah, if you want to understand why Vietnam is becoming so important and crucial to major powers, we have to consider three key points. First is Vietnam's strategic location. Second is its economic growth potential. And third, its foreign policy approach. So let me go one by one. Why Vietnam is so important is, one, because of, as I mentioned, a strategic location. Vietnam is emerging as a key manufacturing hub in this region, as well as Vietnam also have an economic growth potential because it's one of the fastest growing economy in this region. And that is why a majority of major nations, including US, South Korea, Japan, even China, they are heavily investing in Vietnam due to its economic growth potential. On diplomatic front too, we have to see what kind of approach Vietnam is having at the moment. Vietnam is pursuing currently the bamboo diplomacy, and that bamboo diplomacy stress on flexibility and resilience. That means Vietnam wants to have good relation with all major powers, also want to maintain a balanced relationship so that it can navigate through all these geopolitical tensions. That's why it's having a very good relation with the diplomatic blocs like US, Japan, on the other hand. At the same time, Vietnam is also having good relation with China as well. And that's why we have seen that Vietnam has hosted leaders from China, Russia, US, Japan, South Korea. So as I mentioned that if you really want to understand why Vietnam is emerging so crucial, then we have to understand Vietnam's strategic location, its economic growth potential, as well as its flexible foreign policy approach.
Right. And meanwhile, back on the economy, Professor Song, what are your prospects regarding South Korea's economic ties with Vietnam, especially in the field of semiconductors?
Yeah, I cannot but talk about Professor Rajiv's just more comments about the moments ago, particularly very interesting terminology, the bamboo diplomacy. I clearly agree with his position and ideas. And to that regards, actually, the Vietnamese government has established some comprehensive strategic partnership with China, Russia, and India. Then the first is South Korea. So to that regard, the Vietnamese government has not yet established such a strategic partnership with or some advanced countries in the US or in Europe at all. So to that regards, they would like to maintain very hard and strong but flexible enough to be molded into different shape. I think that is the idea of the bamboo diplomatics. Also, that is also true to some economic situations, economic trade relationship with South Korea. Because South Korea, Samsung, and previously Samsung has invested so much in China. But however, because of as I mentioned earlier, because of the conflict between China and the US trade, Samsung cannot but move. They can help moving to Vietnam, the neighboring country. The same is also true to Lotte and the other SK and the other big conglomerates, because Vietnam not only have a huge population and relatively very cheap labor, even though the base salary has been increased recently. But so that is very attractive to South Korea, some big manufacturing companies and a kind of a hub to produce some products for the semiconductor parts and the garments and some digital electricity. So that's why Vietnam has become a very important partner to South Korea economy also.
Right. Professor Kumar, generally speaking, very generally speaking, how far do you suppose has South Korea come in its quest to becoming a global pivotal state, speaking within your capacity as a scholar?
Yeah, that's a very important development taking place in South Korea. As we all are aware about that the current president, Yoon Suk-yeol, he is pursuing the global pivotal state diplomacy. And under this strategy, they want to make Korea as a responsible state who can promote freedom, rule of law, human rights in the global affairs. And I think Korea is trying to achieve its objective in many ways. The first is Korea is trying to play a more proactive role in global diplomacy. For example, if you look at the diplomatic negotiation between South Korea and United States, South Korea and Japan recently, you will find that there are so many contents are there. That content suggests that Korea is becoming more proactive to raise its voice about rule of law, freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific region. Not only that, but Korea is also trying to achieve its foreign policy priorities by enhancing humanitarian aids and development ODA. For example, this year South Korea have announced to invest around 5 billion USD for official development assistance ODA. That's a significant increase from the last year, almost 10% increase. So that's very important to understand how Korea is going to realize its global pivotal state diplomacy. Even in South Korea-Vietnam ties too, Korea is trying to achieve its foreign policy priority. Because if you look at the last year content when President Yoon went to Vietnam, he clearly mentioned that South Korea wants to establish a relation with Vietnam on a strategic front to promote rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. I think it's a very important development. So I think South Korea is trying to achieve its foreign policy priorities through these kind of initiatives.
And it's on the right path then, right, Professor Kumar?
I think so.
All right. Professor Kumar, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition. Thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thanks for having me.
And Professor Song, as always, thank you very much for your insights today.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
Social media is all abuzz about plogging. Have you heard about this term? Plogging is a combination of the Swedish words meaning pick up and jogging. It's about picking up trash while jogging to make our planet and us healthy. The entire global community agrees on the seriousness of environmental issues. Originating in Sweden in 2016, plogging has drawn international attention as an eco-friendly campaign. The goal of plogging is to make both the Earth and its inhabitants healthy. It's also a perfect way to work out, as plogging offers the benefits of both cardio and muscle exercises. In fact, plogging helps burn more calories than jogging. Plogging does not require a lot of preparation. Just walk, run, and pick up. That's it. How about sharing the photos of you plogging on social media? If you want to protect the environment and stay fit at the same time, plogging may be the answer. For the sake of Earth, for our sake. One more step for a better future. The Earth and Environment Report.
Arirang TV is conducting a quality and satisfaction evaluation to enhance the broadcast service for viewers worldwide. Please visit our website www.arirang.com to provide your honest opinions. Participants will be entered into a draw for a chance to win prizes. Overseas TV viewer survey. We look forward to hearing from you.